For today's video, I'm going to be talking about what I think would happen if Geauga Lake had never closed. Just a little disclaimer here. I know this isn't exactly what would have happened, but so you don't need to go down in the comments and say how this is all wrong and you just totally disagree, because I know this isn't 100% realistic and this is not what actually would have happened. So for the format, I'm going to go through each year from 2007 through 2021 and say what I think would have happened. And I'm only going to be looking at Cedar Fair parks for this video because I know there would have been some smaller effects on other parks, but for this video I'm just going to be looking at Cedar Fair parks. One more thing before I get started. I know if Geauga Lake had actually stayed at the Cedar Fair park and it didn't close, Cedar Fair would have probably just gave them nothing because they're too close to Cedar Point. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to have it where they actually invest in the park. So I'm going to start with 2007 because that is the year where Cedar Fair really started to make changes to Geauga Lake, and for this scenario they're going to be treated well. So I do think for 2007 Cedar Point will still get Maverick, Valley Fair will still get Renegade, and Knott's Berry Farm will still get Sierra Sidewinder. The big difference is they can't relocate X-Flight or Firehawk to Kings Island, so I think Cedar Fair is going to be willing to invest some money to give Kings Island a B&M Flyer in that exact same spot, and it will probably be called Firehawk as well, just because they hadn't used that name before and it was available. We start to see a lot of changes in 2008, mainly because of all the coasters from Geauga Lake not being able to be relocated. So I think Kings Dominion obviously can't get Dominator, so I'm going to say they get a flat ride somewhere maybe in that general part of the park instead. And Dorney Park obviously can't get Possessed, so I'm saying Cedar Fair wants them to get into coaster still, so they're going to make a small investment and give them a Zamperla Moto coaster for 2008. Knott's Berry Farm also still receives Pony Express. And I'm also going to say that Behemoth at Canada's Wonderland gets delayed because Geauga Lake hasn't received a coaster in a while, and they're going to be the main focus for 2008, but don't worry, Canada's Wonderland fans, Behemoth is still going to be coming at a later date. So for 2008, Geauga Lake receives Diamondback. And it isn't going to have the exact same layout as the one we have in real life at Kings Island, but it's going to be similar. It's going to have a few changes just to fit in the plot of land that Geauga Lake has, and it's going to be about a similar style of B&M Hyper to Diamondback at Kings Island. And I see this as happening because Kings Island has just received a brand new B&M roller coaster in 2007, so it's not time for them to get a new coaster. So Geauga Lake can use the same Diamondback name for their B&M Hyper coaster because they haven't received a coaster in a good few years now. For 2009, Worlds of Fun still receives Prowler. Canada's Wonderland gets Behemoth a year later in 2009 instead of 2008, just having a B&M Hyper swap with Geauga Lake pretty much. And Michigan's Adventure cannot get their Vekoma SLC, so Cedar Fair decides to make a small investment and give them a Zamperla Moto coaster so they can still have a new coaster. And Carowinds can't get their Boomerang, so they just get a small flat ride in that same spot. For 2010, I don't foresee any major changes. Carowinds and Kings Dominion still receive Intimidator and Intimidator 305, respectively. 2011 is just going to be one very large investment. Kings Island hasn't received a coaster since 2007, and they still have the plot of land that Diamondback currently sits on as open. So I think for 2011, before any problems arise with Intimidator 305 back in 2010, Cedar Fair already orders another Intamin Giga, and this time going to Kings Island, and they want to make it even more extreme than Intimidator 305 because the problems haven't arisen yet. So they're going to go with a 350-foot tall Intamin Giga coaster, and they're going to name it Intimidator 350. And this will use up all the Diamondback land and probably most of what is currently Mystic Timbers land. Intimidator 350 ends up having major issues. It's the most intense roller coaster ever, and the GP just don't like it because of the intensity. However, the enthusiasts love it, but it very rarely operates due to all the technical difficulties. And trims get installed, making it not as good of a ride, but still one of the most intense coasters ever. But a lot of issues arise between Cedar Fair and Intamin about this coaster and all of its issues. 2011 ends up being a huge year for changes. The one thing that stays the same is that Canada's Wonderland will still receive Leviathan, and it's still the main coaster edition for Cedar Fair in 2012. One other thing that happens during the year is that Cedar Fair starts some lawsuits with Intamin over the problems with the Intimidator 350, and then some GPs start having lawsuits with Kings Island and Cedar Fair over the intensity and the ride experience of Intimidator 350 being too intense for them and possibly suffering minor injuries. And then in turn, Cedar Fair sues Intamin even more, causing a lot of financial issues in Intamin. And they already had a lot of financial issues from just building the coaster. So it turns out that Intimidator 350 for Intamin basically becomes what X2 was for Aero, and it puts the company of Intamin out of business. I'm not going to be talking about all the other changes that don't have to do with Cedar Fair from Intamin going out of business. So like things like Pantheon not being built are not going to be in this video, but there would be some changes at other parks due to Intamin being out of business after Intimidator 350. Also in 2012, Kings Island realizes with all of the problems of Intimidator 350, they don't want two super popular coasters of the park, Intimidator 350 and Son of Beast, just rarely operating and being closed a lot of the time. So they decide, instead of tearing Son of Beast down, to actually try to get it operating again. And what they do is they hire GCI to come in, do a lot of retracking and reprofiling to make it a very smooth and comfortable ride. And it will reopen, probably not in 2012, but probably not in and it probably would be not until 2013. But it ends up being a very good ride and is a huge success for Kings Island after a failure that was Intimidator 350. Another thing that happens in 2012 is during Geauga Lake's Haunt event, we find out that Thunderhawk at Geauga Lake, their Vekoma SLC, is going to be permanently closing at the end of Haunt. And that starts rumors about what could be replacing it and if Thunderhawk could be relocated. After a couple of crazy years, 2013 doesn't see many major changes. Cedar Point still receives Gatekeeper, Knott's Berry Farm still receives Coast Rider, and California's Great America still receives Gold Striker. The only major difference is that now that Thunderhawk has been removed from Geauga Lake, it can be relocated to Michigan's Mentor, just like it was in real life, although it is a few years later. In 2014, although it's only been 4 years since Intimidator 305, without Dominator, Kings Dominion hasn't received many coasters in recent years, so Cedar Fair decides to give them a B&M Flying Coaster in the spot that in real life is occupied by Dominator. Also, it has now been 6 years since Geauga Lake has last received a coaster, and with all the money going into Kings Island from Intimidator 350 and Son of Beast, I don't think they're going to be receiving Banshee. So, and obviously, they can't obviously receive Banshee because Son of Beast is still there. So, Geauga Lake is going to be getting a B&M invert for 2014, and they can reuse the name Banshee. However, it won't have the same layout as Banshee does in real life because it's taking the land plot of a Vekoma SLC, so it will have to have a much more compact layout. For 2015, we don't see any major changes. Carowinds still receives Fury 325, and as that was a very expensive investment, just like in real life, Cedar Fair doesn't decide to do anything else that year. For 2016, Cedar Point still receives Valraven, and it has been a very long time since Kings Island has received a coaster at this point, 5 years, which is long for them. So, instead of building Mystic Timbers in 2017, they decided to do it in 2016, but its land plot isn't available because Intimidator 350. However, they decide to get rid of Dinosaurs Alive, and they can put it in that land behind where Firehawk is, which in real life is currently the back half of Orion, and they find room for maybe not the exact same layout, but a similar GCI back there. Also during Geauga Lake's Haunt, we found out that Raging Wolf Bob's is going to be permanently closing, and this immediately. With Mystic Timbers having opened a year early, Cedar Fair still wants to add something in 2017 as a coaster, so they decide to move Hang Time at Knott's Berry Farm up a year early, and that opens in 2017 instead of 2018. So for 2018, Mean Streaker at Cedar Point is still RMC'd into Steel Vengeance, and California's Great America still receives Railblazer. Also, Raging Wolf Bob's is RMC'd and it opens in 2018. It will have some sort of a name along the lines of Wolf's Revenge or something along those lines. And because of this, there isn't really the funds to RMC Hurler at Kings Dominion, into Twisted Timbers, so they just decided to keep it as Hurler and scrap the project to RMC it. Also during Kings Island Haunt, we find out of Vortex's closure. This comes as a bit of surprise, especially because it happens earlier than many expected. And the reason of this was due to Kings Island not having as many possible locations for new coasters available as they do in real life around this time. So they decided to remove Vortex a little early just because they know it wasn't going to make it much longer anyway, to use that as the land plot for their next coaster. 2019 is fairly similar to what we saw in real life. Carowinds still receives Copperhead Strike, and Canada's Wonderland still receives Yukon Striker. However, during Geauga Lake Haunt, we find out of X-Flight's closure. This doesn't come as much of a surprise, as Firehawk was removed from Kings Island only a year earlier in real life, and the ride was just reaching its end of its service life, and they really needed some parts for it for Nighthawk at Carowinds. By 2020, it's been 6 years since Kings Dominion has received a coaster because they haven't gotten Twisted Timbers. So, Cedar Fair decides to move up their B&M Wing project a year early and builds it in 2020. And Volcano, they just speed up the demolition of Volcano a little bit, and they got the plot of land right there for their B&M Wing, and it ends up opening a year early in 2020. Also by this point, Kings Island is due for a new coaster again. So in Vortex's old plot of land, I think they will receive a mock multi-launch coaster. But whatever replaces Vortex in real life is probably what ends up going here, but I'm just going to go with a mock multi-launch for the purpose of this video. But however, that doesn't mean my real Kings Island prediction for the next coaster is a mock multi-launch. I certainly think it's a possibility, but it's not necessarily my real prediction. The last year I'm going to be including in this video is 2021 because we really need to know what happens in real life to predict any further years. So by this point it's been a little while since Geauga Lake has gotten a new coaster, so I think because of Kings Island are not receiving Orion, Cedar Fair has a little bit of money to make an investment in a Giga, and I think Geauga Lake is a park that gets it. So I think they're going to go with the name Orion because they don't use it at Kings Island, and it could take up a little bit of Vekoma Flying Dutchman's land, just like it did Kings Island, along with some more land that they have available along the edge of Geauga Lake. Also, some other real-life coaster additions in 2021 would probably also happen, especially if Cedar Point or California's Great America receives a coaster. One other thing I'm going to end this video with is that after 10 years of problems, Kings Island decides to finally remove Intimidator 350, as it was just too much for Cedar Fair to handle. And while it was a great ride when it ran to its full potential, it just had too many issues, and they decided to remove it. However, before it is scrapped, Six Flags decides to come in and make a huge offer on the coaster to buy it from them. And Cedar Fair says, well, it's better to get some money for it than if we didn't. So they decided to sell it to Six Flags. And Six Flags, even though they hate Gigas, they decided to do this because it's a much cheaper way to get a Giga than any other way they would. And they think this is an awesome ride, and they're going to run to its full potential at a Six Flags park. I'm not going to be predicting what Six Flags park this would go to, but I would just say Six Flags Magic Mountain and Six Flags Great America probably don't have the space for it. So the only big three Six Flags park available is Six Flags Great Adventure. So I think that could certainly be a possibility. Or it could go to a lesser Six Flags park if Six Flags really wants to boost them up to become one of their better parks. Thanks for watching. I know this video is probably pretty triggering, especially for the Intamin fanboys out there, but thank you for watching.